thought I'd make a video. Had a pretty productive, good day. Spent a couple hours at the library. Quiet environment, filling out some applications. Hopefully maybe find some work before I leave sometime before the first 2 weeks of August end. Earn a little bit of extra income before I leave. And I was filling out an application on Home Depot, and I was thinking many years ago, I think it was like my first official job to work at Home Depot. And when I went there to fill out an application, I remember they had this computer that I had to take a test, and it was like, I want to say it was like a old school computers. Not old school computers, but like set up, you know how like they had the old school Pac-Man where you sit down at an arcade and the screen is not set like sort of in front of you, but like on a desk, the screen is. And I remember the manager told me, you have to come in and take a test. Be prepared to, you're going to probably be here for at least a couple of hours, maybe even 3 or something. It was at least 2 hours, and it was. And it was like a very lengthy test, and very lengthy. In fact, it was like you take it was maybe, I'm going to say it was at least 2 hours. And it was like, because I remember it taking me forever. And I authentically tried my best to take the test. And I took the test and completed it. And could have even been 3 hours if it was a really long test. And a couple of days later, it was like a week later, I come in for the interview, and the manager, who at the time, I think her name was Cheryl, and I think Susie's dad worked there. I think that was Susie's dad that was one of the managers there. I didn't know it was. He looked like him, but I think it was Susie Kelly's dad. Anyway, I was in for the interview before they hired me, and they told me that they had to get me in because they said that I scored nearly a perfect score. They said that I answered like one or two questions even wrong, or like it was nearly almost a perfect score, that they hadn't ever had anybody that scored that high before on a test. And it was like a personality test. It was like a personality. I was 18 years old. I just turned 18. I hadn't graduated high school, and yeah, they told me I scored a nearly a perfect score on that, and it asked me all kinds of questions, and it was like a personality question and all kinds of shit. But the lady said that I did so impressive that I nearly scored a perfect score on there. Whatever that means, whatever test that I took, because I never been to any company before that ever had me take such a lengthy test for a job on a computer system. Yeah, I remember being there for a long time, and I remember how the scenery was set up. I sat down because it was inside near the door entrance, and they had some like benches, and I remember they had this all these, you know how like when you go to Home Depot they have all these magazines that tell you all the fancy houses and architectural digest and all that shit. I remember grabbing these magazines and looking while I was, after taking a lengthy break test, and to just set my dreams or set my goals, what kind of house I wanted if I ever get out. And I remember looking at these houses like, God, that's really beautiful. I was like, I like that, and I like this, and this is the beginning stages where you always want to set your goals very high when you're young, and having your own home, and going through that and dreaming of that in my own home, and took a 20-minute break and then took the rest of the test. And I remember that test was like I want to say I think that test was 3 hours, but I don't think I recall taking a test that long. And I was very certain of all the questions and read them all clear and answered the best. And I couldn't believe she said that I nearly scored a perfect score. They hadn't come across anybody that had scored as well as I did. And they said there was maybe like one other person that came pretty close as well, but said that I had scored like the highest. But whatever that means, I don't know what test they gave me, because this is when all this house, and they built my mother a house, and all this stuff was going on. My mother got ran over by a forklift and all this other stuff. But anyway, thought I'd share that.